quite the talent he is. Proper chatterbox yada. If you're keen, it'll be brilliant. Today, we're going to keep it simple. I'll bark out a basic command and you watch. Keen to know? He'll set your tail wagging. Does mine, hence why I'm backing him. Right then, Wookie here. Do take a seat, won't you? Give us your full attention while we listen to my pal, Yada.
Hey, welcome to the Yawa vlog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. We have a Wookiee here that's going to be joining us as well. It's nice to have the wonderful introduction. We're going to continue our basics program. This is on Shabuwah. We're going to get really close to the end of this series. We've made a comprehensive run of it. In our last program, we got into some fairly nasty business. That is that, when speaking of the fact that on the Shabuwah harvest, that his covenant family is going to vanish and no one is going to know where they have gone or not even be able to figure it out. But there are going to be a group of curmudgeons that are very bothered by the fact that they were not included. And God has a lot to say about them. And we read a lot about that in our last program. We'll conclude this analysis of them. But suffice it to say, since God said he's sending them to Sheol, he is not very happy with what they have done and their continuing disparagement of the one that Yahweh has sent, his Nakar and his Malek. So here, as we return to what was written 2,700 years ago by Yeshayah, the prophet Isaiah, on behalf of Yahweh, he continued to disparage this mother goddess cult by saying, with many variations of your way and prolonged path, this is again first or second person feminine singular. So God is continuing to lambast a particularly irritating woman that he has previously called demonic. And it says that you have become worrisome. God's tired of it. It never should have happened. And once it did happen, it's gone on for a year and a half, and they just can't go on and tend to their own business. So with the many variations of your way, and that it's true even from that point of view, they're constantly changing their agenda. Then you have become worrisome, but you're never willing to admit that life of the beastly group is hopeless and futile and damning. God views them as demonic, as contrarian, as adversarial, and no matter how many times he points out that what they're doing is wrong, they are unwilling to admit their delirium. Through your influence, you sought to be found sufficient and to obtain a reason to assert the notion that you weren't the ones who were diseased and afflicted, that you were not sick, you were not morally wounded, you were not grievous. But the fact is, you are. Yeshayah, Isaiah 57:10. So, as is the case with most serial liars, they never are able to keep their story straight. They try to prevail by argumentum by distraction. You show that what they have stated is dead wrong, and rather than admit, okay, yeah, well, you proved that we were wrong, so we'll go away now, correct what we have done. No, they just go on to the next lie. And then you prove that one wrong, they just go on to their next lie. So when confronted with irrefutable evidence that they are mistaken, they pivot to another position as if argumentum by distraction were a rational response. But of course it's not. And therefore, debating them becomes wearisome, even from God's point of view, even though he has so many prophecies that he has issued to expose them, condemn them. Even when obviously wrong, the effort is made to help them understand that this is a path they should not be following. They reject all evidence to the contrary, even from God, and they deny reproof. They are incapable of admitting that they are wrong. And that's very much like the religious and conspiratorial. I've done so many programs proving that all of the conspiracies are an absolute farce. And yet they just keep right on coming. And they are so convinced that they are the truthers and that they see what others don't see. And it's nothing but ignorance. So after having revealed that he is sending the mother goddesses to Sheol, one would think that Yahweh would move on to another pressing issue, but that's not the case. And even with countless misleading paths being strewn haphazardly upon his own, God remains uniquely concerned about the Anan, this demonic woman, and her accomplices. And that's unusual for Yahweh, because his cast of, this cast, I should say, of caustic characters is far from the first to never admit that they're wrong. And I suppose that the difference is this time that this beastly group of naysayers, they just picked the wrong time and the wrong target for their futile and damning assault on God's plans and people at the very time where it's essential for God to restore his name and for him to resolve this conflict with so many stealing everything that was achieved by his beloved son, Dode, for religious purposes, and misrepresenting who he is and what he is offering and expects in return. This is not the time, and there's only one person that has been authorized and is actually doing all of these things. And God says, you're going to stand in the way of that. I'm going to send you to hell. You ought to know that's a bad choice. So as a result, the psychotic instigator of this ill-timed rebellion has been called out and condemned. The woman who has long been crazed to find herself written into God's plan so that she might feel important in light of all evidence otherwise, has been revealed as the most catastrophic and condescending of souls, as someone far worse than worthless. And while she was always psychotic, clinically diagnosed, anxiety-ridden, and diabolical, she was never honest. Her insecurities terrified her to such an extent that she had to mask them behind a veil of, mother goddess delusions. And so God says, and by association, who is it and what are you so troubled over? What has caused this riddling of you with anxiety, causing you to dread life to the point of being frantic and psychotic? Again, feminine singular. While you continue to be so intimidated and anxious, awestruck, and yet trembling, horrified to the point of being terrified, feminine singular, such that with your outright lies, you are promoting a pagan delusion which is contrary to reality, feminine singular. And therefore it's me, God says, that you no longer mention or remember, such that you do not recall my most memorable of men. You have not considered these words judgmentally, nor have you taken these statements to heart, examining this message relative to your own inclinations and your motivations. Don't question whether I will take action, even after remaining silent for so long. From the very beginning and without end regarding me, you have never shown any actual respect or admiration. Well, that's quite a rebuke, young lady. And it fits you to a T. You're a fraud, and always have been. And the idiots that you have beguiled to support you should be ashamed, but they're not smart enough. So note to self and others, lying about Yahweh while slandering his collaboration with his Nakar is a very bad idea. Turns out God does not appreciate such things, and he holds grudges as he should. God has endured better part of 6,000 years of hostility. And finally, he has someone who is resolute and loyal and standing up for him, who has applied his full cadre of attributes and energies to reestablishing Yahweh's name and the reputation of his beloved Son and his plan from beginning to end. And you've got these nincompoops that got nothing else better to do with their lives than to try to tear it down after finally being reestablished. Oh, God's upset. As is the case with most psychopaths, however, deep down, they are incurably insecure. This giant hole exists in them that they just try to suck everything in to try to fill. They will say or do anything to mask their vulnerability. So today's Anan, demonic woman, and Zana, duplicitous whore, who has been so inappropriately cruel to my wife, caustic towards me, and condescending towards God, was clinically diagnosed as being exactly as Yahweh has just foretold. Desperate to hide her degraded mental state, she slanders others, all as part of a smokescreen. The woman my wife and I had treated better than anyone in her life ever, by her own admission many, many times, returned the favor by lashing out against us when we had never been anything other than supportive and kind. And according to God, her motivation was her own sense of inadequacy. She found our genuineness and generosity intimidating because she was not capable of either and was horrified by the comparison. This is a debilitating failure in human character and psyche. It's one that I've studied for a very long time, and I've experienced often in my life. So I'm fully aware that Yahweh understands this problem and has assessed her conditions accurately. It is the same conclusions I have come to many times over. I have empathy in this regard. However, there are millions of psychopaths in the world today. There is only one whose outright lies and pagan deceptions emerge from someone who was exposed to the truth and then chose to twist it and misrepresent everything, slandering not only Yahweh, but his chosen implement. This is the kind of dishonesty manifest by Satan in the garden when he conspired with Chawa against Adam. And the fact that her vitriol is being spewed publicly at this time, with the fate of Yahweh's Moedim hanging in the balance, the invitations to participate in his Bereth offered by his Bakor, firstborn, all on the line. Yahweh is, of course, unrelenting in his condemnation. Now, sure, the likes of Paul, Akiba, Muhammad, they've lied, creating debilitating religions, but they were always unaffiliated with God, his chosen implements, and they never knew the truth. But such was not the case with Yahweh, with Miriam, with Mikel, or with the cult of DP. They were not mistaken. They exemplify deliberate deception. Now, this is why Yahweh confronts the Anan Zana by telling us that she has dismissed him and his most memorable of men. She heard and saw his word spoken and written by his Nakar, but she failed to consider their implications. She placed her ambitions above God's acclaim, her interests over God's pronouncements. She not only created and promoted a mother goddess, changing Yahweh's name and testimony to advance her pagan proposition, she became the voice of her invention. And then when I demonstrated that the passages she had cited to promote her delusion said the opposite of her proposition, she formed accounts and websites designed specifically to destroy my reputation and the credibility of Yada Yahweh for daring to tell the truth. Turns out, Yahweh knew she would do this very thing at this time and conveyed this prophecy to refute the one who will question why she was left behind during the harvest that she tried to commandeer. So God reveals that she brought incarceration in Sheol upon herself. Yahweh isn't to be questioned or trifled with in this manner, especially not now, at this time, in this way. The 2,700 years between this prophecy and its fulfillment isn't to be seen as inaction. God cares deeply about those representing him. Sometimes when we witness someone fall all over themselves this precipitously, renouncing what they once claimed to esteem, we're inclined to wonder if every aspect of their life has been a fraud. And now Yahweh answers this question for us regarding the Whore of Babel. God says that the Zana, left behind on Shabuwah and estranged from him, has never actually been with him. She has always placed her ambitions over his acclaim. And in this way, she's akin to the adversary, which is why God has referred to her as a sorceress. Now, should anyone believe that I'm being unfair in picking on a DP and her cast of malevolent malcontents just because they have striven to undermine everything Yahweh and I have achieved over the past 25 years, that actually isn't the case. I see them as worthless, as ignorant, irrational, and irrelevant. But since that isn't God's perspective, we will continue to go where his words lead. If he wants to expose them and condemn them, then we shall do exactly that. Now, I say this because of what we have read from Yeshaya, Isaiah 56:1, through this point, and Yeshaya, Isaiah 57:11. God identified his co-worker as the Nakar on the occasion of the Shabuwah harvest. Then he went on the attack, specifically denouncing a singular woman along with her minions, because she and they questioned why they are going to be left behind. The subject has not changed, as God remains disgusted by a uniquely deceptive and dishonorable woman and her clique at this time, as is confirmed by the way each condemnation throughout has been presented in the feminine singular. And in particular, Anan, Zana, and Shakir are the most demonic and duplicitous titles in the whole of God's arsenal. And he deployed all three to explain why he was justified in sending this woman to Sheol. He is thereby warning those who believe her that they should reconsider their association with her. God has a long and flawless memory, and it is the only reason. It's not the only, it's one of two reasons that I'm presenting this to you. First reason is that I always go where God's words lead. I've been doing it for 25 years, and I'm not going to change now. He has a message he wants to convey, and I'm going to convey it. And the second is that perhaps Yahweh, like me, still has a place in his heart for one or two people who were once exceedingly devoted and supportive, who were lured away by lies and got played for fools. Maybe they have inadequacies in their own hearts and souls and minds as well that were played, lied to, and deceived. And maybe, just maybe, such a person or two will hear this and break away and come back home. I'm hopeful of that. As you could have told if you have watched the previous episode, well, I have no issue with God's determination on the leaders of this group, and even in his determination of those who have been the most hostile and belligerent. They've earned Sheol, and they know who they are. But there are others who have been sucked in, and I hope they're able to resolve it before it's too late. God says, I myself will correctly recount and report. Then I will declare your sense of righteousness and justice, your means to decide what is right and acquitting, especially your honesty, and that which pertains to your activities and endeavors, the various things that you've done. But neither this nor those you have gathered to you will be of any benefit to you, because there is nothing accomplished by you. Well, God says, I'm going to be fair. You've done something worthwhile, I'll note it. But you need to understand that because of all of the things that you have done, and those that you have surrounded yourself with at this time, you've negated it all, and there is nothing now that you have accomplished that is going to be of any value to you or anyone else. So what God is saying here is that the Zana and the Nakar are in opposite camps. And while my commitment is to be right about Yahweh, accurately presenting his testimony, since she is not, God is recording and presenting what the sorceress has claimed to the contrary. And when this translation and subsequent Yahweh vlog presentation of Yeshaya, Isaiah 56 and 57, this prophecy is properly recorded and shared, acknowledged, we find a accurate fulfillment of what was reported through Yeshaya as he conveyed the indictment of Yahweh. So our Father's assessment began by revealing that he would identify and deliver the tzedakah, the one who is right about him, using him as a means to redeem his people. This would occur prior to and in conjunction with the Shabuwah harvest. He proceeded then to tell us that this Ashaf, this ingathering on Shabuwah of those who are right about him, will cause them to disappear. as they are brought to him in shalom. And while most just remain oblivious, there will be a contingent who are left behind. Those known by their former association and now new accompaniment with a sorceress and a whore. They will have become aware of this harvest and will have expected to have been included in it, but will be excluded and not know why. So as we pondered the implications, we were left with a single object of Yahweh's ire. And that is why the entire diatribe has been rendered in second person, feminine singular, consistently criticizing the one who chose to disparage everything she had previously supported and known. Since God is always fair, it will be on account of what she has pontificated and propositioned that she will be judged. And the ongoing outcome of all of this is already fixed, because God has reported her future and our past so that we might report it. She will have accomplished nothing other than to impugn herself and destroy the lives of her accomplices. While all of this is very specific, from a more generic perspective, few things are more caustic to religious beliefs than Yahweh's testimony when it is accurately presented, as it is here. Every rabbi, pope, cardinal, and bishop, every imam, pastor, and priest, along with many politicians and teachers, will be exposed and condemned in this way, hung by their own words and deeds. It is the strategy I took throughout Twistianity, goddamn religion, and Babel, because by allowing people to be condemned by their own testimony leaves a irrefutable rebuttal. So I hung Paul and Muhammad by their own testimony. So from a broader sense, whether they taught that there was no God, or they spoke of a God by a different name, Yahweh has placed all of these frauds on notice that he will hold them accountable by correctly recounting their words and deeds. It'll be very much like Twistianity and goddamn religion for Paul and Muhammad. Now, this known, there may be a less damning fate awaiting those who have justified the unjustifiable without having become aware of their representations of God and the fact that they're inaccurate. They may be fortunate to have their souls destroyed at the end of their counterproductive lives. But it should be noted that this is unlikely, because a person who would reach the level of a rabbi, a pastor, a preacher, an imam, a mentor, a spokesperson, a politician, a professor, or today, as they say, just the influencer, will have gone so far down dead-end lane that it is really unlikely that they're unaware that what they're advocating is untrue. And yet, while not as bad as the Anan Zana, most continue pontificating their own errant message when it's proven wrong. Some even seek to justify what they must suspect is unreliable. Nevertheless, they are not willing to surrender the status that they have achieved, nor endure the indignity of being ostracized by their peers should they admit that they are promoting lies. And so many of them are. For the souls who have waited too long to choose Yahweh over the Anan, or of others perhaps beguiled by more popular influencers who have become so comfortable relying upon implausible notions. Yahweh says that since he won't be saving them, maybe they'll have better luck with their own followers. But methinks not. But of course, that is because methinks. The text reads, in crying out for you and summoning others on your behalf, or even when issuing a proclamation for you, you have your community, those you've assembled to share your beliefs, stand up for you. Therefore, with regard to all of them, the Ruach Spirit, he will lift up and carry, grasping hold of and taking away the meaningless and valueless, those who are a waste of breath for their useless religiosity. Hebel. So God's just saying, okay, you think you're so smart, you got your little clique together and they're all telling you how wonderful you are. You know, God says and his testimony doesn't apply to you, and that guy that reads it and translates it and shares it and explains it, he's just a meanie. Okay, then see how it works out for you. See if those that cry out for you, that pretend that they're your buddy, issue such proclamations for you all over social media. Don't you have that community that you've assembled to share your beliefs save you? See if they can deliver you. No. Therefore, with God, to all of them, God says, no, it's the Ruach who's going to lift up and carry away, grasping hold of and taking away all of these meaningless and valueless individuals who are, Hebel, a complete waste of breath, futile, vain, conceited frauds. According to God, it does not matter how loudly they cry out on her behalf, which they do, or how many followers she assembles in her brood to attack, which they do. There will be no deliverance from Sheol. This isn't a popularity contest, other than to say if you're popular, then you're in the wrong contest. So since their spirit mom can't save them, and their cadre of flying monkeys has no value, then God won't either. And he's taunting them, trying to get them to see if you, okay, you're so full of yourselves, go save yourself. Have spirit mom save you. Why not? All of those who openly condemn Yada and the Amma. See how well they stand up to the Spirit of God. The very spirit that this cult claims is their mommy is going to carry them away and dispose of them. Then demonstrating that he has a sense of humor and that he knows how to foreclose an argument, Yahweh has his Ruach, his spirit, as I have shared, carry them away. The very Ruach they tried to turn into a mother god will capture and collect what Yahweh perceives as valueless souls. They're a waste of breath. They're Hebel, which is what Shabuwah named her firstborn, because they promoted idolatrous, religious, conspiratorial notions, wasteful ideas regarding God. And even more condemning, when deploying the spirit, which is a feminine noun in Hebrew, Yahweh addressed both verbs, Nasha and Lakash, in third person, masculine, singular, as he. As such, the mommy goddesses are completely blown away in their devotion to a spiritual mother. Even when Yahweh speaks of the actions of his Ruach, He addresses the verb in masculine singular. That was pure genius on God's part to convey this as he did, especially under these circumstances. You don't want to argue with God. You will lose. Well, this continues to be a specific assault on the Shakir's mother goddess clique. In a broader sense, those who believe that the popular appeal of their religion makes them right are going to be proven wrong by the one who is right. Those who cling to the past as if the longevity of their religion makes it true will be unheralded in the future. When believers claim that millions or billions cannot be wrong by virtue of, well, their numbers and their many proclamations and sheer size of the community, they're choosing men over God. And I'm here to tell you that 1 million men, 1 billion men, 8 billion men don't equate to one God. And in all of human history, the march of civilization, you know that the majority has never been right. Ever. Majority of voters elected Donald Trump, Satan incarnate. God is not holding a referendum. The use of kibbutz in this statement, of course, is quite clever, albeit biting. On the surface, it reveals that far too many expect their devotion to their counterfeit and their replacement religious assemblies to save them. They believe that customary delusions that have failed in the past will suddenly prevail for them after a millennium of anguishing and failed results. But frankly, nothing short of accepting what is right will deliver the misled from the time of Jacob's troubles. Their great kibbutz, accumulation of things, their many companions, their plethora of convocations, and the vast magnitude of what they have received, whether it be from rabbis, pastors, priests, or in social media among influencers, they have assumed was true because it was promoted, will be as vapor, as worthless as they have made their own souls. This is the myth of the social media influencer. Now, digging deeper, kibbutz forms the basis of kibbutz, the farming collectives in Israel, which became the seed from which the socialist dreams of communism emerged. And as we have learned, while an individual can be good or bad, right or wrong, collectively, men and women are almost always wrong. Even worse, kibbutz is from Kabbalah, to receive and accept assumptions which correspond to that which is the opposite of reality. A cabal and the feminine is Kabbalah, the spiritualism of the rabbis as proclaimed in their Zohar. So whether it's socialism or spiritualism, Yahweh described his people accurately, just as he said he would. Religious pronouncements are all futile, holding no more weight with God than the fleeting breath of residual vapor. The Ruach will blow them away, cleansing the earth of all of these debilitating lies and liars. The answer, which is the antidote for religion, is to trust and rely upon Yahweh and his testimony. Those who do will inherit the world, along with all of the benefits of the covenant. As God's children, we will live in his presence, atop his set-apart mountain, during the 1,000-year celebration of our return to the garden during Sukkah. As such, Hebel is breath, the symbol of mortal life and of spoken words. And Yahweh's Spirit will therefore seize the mortal souls whose lifeless words have misled others. He will carry them away to an eternity in Sheol. Wasted breath, indeed. So this is the conclusion of Yahweh's overt rebuke of the Anon, sorceress, Zanah whore, who is a Shakur, vain betrayer and deceptive fraud, who is fixated even today on demeaning Yada, disparaging Yada Yahweh, and criticizing the Yahweh vlog. From God's Nakar, his Choder, Bashar, and Zeroah, in addition to his beloved son, our king and savior, Dode, while claiming the Shabuwah harvest, of course, as their own. Yahweh's condemnation is comprised of a dozen detailed, comprehensive, and very concise statements. It is the longest and most relentless denunciation of anyone found in the Torah or prophets. It's worse than the dressing down of Satan in the garden and of the Israelites for their belligerence and antagonism throughout the Exodus. The introduction, timing, and depiction is a perfect match for one particular woman at this time for this reason and none other. So that it's fresh in our minds as we depart to this analysis, I would like to reprise our denunciation, God's denunciation of the Mother Goddess and her malcontent brood of vipers. And it began with this pronouncement: every beast of the country and open environs, you will choose to come to devour and destroy every living thing in the foliage of the tree. Yeshayah 56:9. Those who are watchmen assigned to be lookouts, they've become blind. All of them are ignorant and opposed to Yada, without understanding, without a revelation, unaware and unable to teach, such that they are clueless. They are universally contemptible, rife with emotion and akin to dumb dogs. Sorry, Wookiee. Incapable of intelligent speech. They are without the capacity to understand or the ability to prevail, and they will not succeed, as they're unable to even bark, panting while dreaming, and thus hallucinating, lying around smitten with their inactivity and lack of awareness. And so these overtly emotional malcontents have an intensely fierce soul, stubborn, self-willed. They will not acknowledge that they have gone too far, never admitting that they were gluttonous and unrestrained, as they are insatiable. Those acting as shepherds, clamoring for authorization to lead and feed the flock, they're not Yada, because they are ignorant and irrational, neither perceiving nor comprehending, and thus lacking the capacity to make intelligent connections. All of them have turned to their own way. Every person after their own ill-gotten gain, and this dishonest advantage, without exception or restraint, is going to lead to their very demise in the end. You should agree to join us, they would say. Consenting to assemble together to change things around is their plea. I have decided to obtain, she said, intoxication so that we can habitually, inebriated and constantly consuming, sundry liquors to the point of an incapacitated judgment through fermented libations. Come have a sip. Therefore, it will be like this day if the days to come are opposed and delayed to a significant extent for thousands of remnants. Yeah, we can keep it from happening. We'll just say we don't want it to happen. We'll negate everything. Let's see how it plays out. It's then that the right and vindicated are going to vanish. They'll disappear, such that those who remain will not know where they have gone. No one will give it any thought or meaningfully ponder the implications. Loyal and devoted individuals who are steadfast will be harvested on Shabuwah, gathered together and taken away during the Asaph, this ingathering. Well, no one makes the connection to comprehend why. For indeed, away from the presence of this evil shepherding, this disastrous calamity caused by troublesome compatriots, miserable companions who are wickedly wrong, well, those who are correct, who are upright and innocent, well, they're going to be gathered in the harvest. They will be removed and received. And when they are, they will arrive reconciled and restored, intact and healthy, satisfied and content, blessed and prosperous, in a favorable circumstance and quite literally saved. They will be spiritually restored and comfortably settled within his environs, moving about and walking around while conducting their lives in a manner which is right, honest, and fitting, of course, proper. But as for all of you, those of you who are still present, wanting, indeed expecting to approach at this time, you are the children of false pretenses, under the spell of an Anan, a demonic woman, deliberately conjuring a false spirit to obscure reality and to blow smoke as a form of sorcery. The very seed of a Naaf, an adulterous one who is unfaithful, disloyal, and of course unreliable. The Zana, the despised whore, the loathed woman prostituting her despicable nature by pandering to her partners for illicit favors and affection, even bribes. On what basis have you, without any actual provocation, independently become so effeminate and sensitive, so whiny like bitches, self-entitled crybabies, delighting in ridiculing and mocking because you're so easily swayed to incitement? Against what and whom do you open your mouths and boast, sticking out your fangs and prolonging your tongue lashings? Are you not the children born of revolting rebellion, who rose up in clear defiance of the authority and of the relationship by holding a grudge and by remaining stubbornly indignant? The seed of a shakir, a vain and useless liar, who was a great betrayer, a deceptive fraud, promoting a sham. Are you not among those who burn with rage and are so intensely and acrimoniously riled up and boiling over in cantankerous frenzy, steaming while spewing animosity against Ha'el, the most prominent of trees, along with the ram, even the doorway and prolific source of leadership, all provided in the orderly arrangement of time, of the spreading out, of the entirety of the most productive of trees, thereby taking the lives of those who would be born, who would have an inheritance, away from the Sheaf, who is the branch, and the Shelah, who is the rocky crag. Your fate, your reward, and assigned inheritance, therefore, is among the illegitimate and the insulting flatterers who feigns praise and adoration, but are actually nothing but decisive and divisive. Their sorrow is your lot. After all, to them you have poured out a drink offering with a fusion of ideas. You have elevated, overstated, and offered up your own grain offerings. So why should I change my mind and relent, ceasing to be concerned about such things? Over the exalted mount, arrogantly through self-aggrandizement and being carried away, you have made your bed. Additionally, there you ascribe status to yourselves while you went about slaughtering the living. Then in the end, at the backside of the door, at the door frame, and on the cusp of abundant life, you set up and placed your own memorial, along with your maxims, because indeed, separated and away from me, you're laid bare, revealing your death bier. And you have climbed up into your bed for no reason other than to enlarge it opportunistically and greedily. So all of you have made a covenant with her against them, cutting yourselves into her situation in opposition to them. You adore their bed. You prefer and have inspected fallacies, fake love. You have consistently contended with, imposing yourself over, the approach of the king, calloused, unresponsive, and fat. While you have increased and multiplied your mixtures and compounds, even as perfumes, ointments, and salves, then you dispatch, sending out your convoluted messengers and anguishing envoys to cause distress and anxiety, while you besiege on behalf of yourself, all in adversarial fashion, as witnesses, continually alienating and estranged, separated as much as is absolutely possible in space-time, even as you are humiliated and you are cast down forever into Sheol. With the many variations of your way and prolonged path, you have become wearisome and tedious, but you're never willing to admit that the life of this beastly group is hopeless, futile, and damning, such that it must desist. Through your influence, you sought to be found sufficient and to obtain a reason to assert that it wasn't you who were diseased and afflicted. So by association, who is it and what are you so troubled over? Why are you riddled with anxiety, dreading to the point of being frantic and psychotic? While you continue to be so intimidated and anxious, you're awestruck and yet horrified, such that you are deceptive with your outright lies, promoting delusions which are contrary to reality. And therefore, it's me you no longer remember, such that you do not recall my most memorable of men. You are not considered and you have not considered these words judgmentally. You haven't processed them intelligently. And you have taken these statements and have failed to examine them. And you've not even considered how they relate to your motivations. So don't question whether I will take action, even after remaining silent for so long. Continuously and from the very beginning regarding me, you have never shown any respect. I myself will correctly recount and report, then declare, conspicuously publishing and making known your sense of righteousness, the means that you have deployed to determine what you think is right, and that which pertains to your activities and your endeavors, the things that you have actually done. But neither this nor those you have gathered unto you are going to be of any benefit to you, because there is nothing worthwhile that has been accomplished by you. Everything is wrong. So in crying out for you, summoning others on your behalf, even when issuing proclamations for you, have these others in your community that you have assembled to share your beliefs. See if they can save you. With regard to all of them, the Ruach Spirit, he will lift up and carry, grasping hold of and taking away the meaningless and valueless who are a waste of breath, along with their useless diatribes. That was Yeshaya 56 and 57, my friends. And since sending the Anan, demonic woman, and the Zanah, this deceitful whore who is Shakar, the betrayer, to Sheol, is a very serious accusation and result. Before Yahweh turns to the good guys in this story and moves on to address his co-workers and their collaboration together, I'd like to preclude any confusion concerning the fate of souls. It is germane to know that there are three potential outcomes, and not just the two proposed by religion. It's one of the first insights that I heralded some 25 years ago. So as we should expect, those who have come to know and trust Yahweh, relying on him by observing his testimony, such that they engage in his covenant, celebrate the Shabbat, and appreciate his son by attending his Moedim, they're going to be greeted as family and welcomed into heaven by their Father. There will be no judgment, no bowing down, no review of our words and our deeds. And while we will inherit everything and live forever according to God, this is a relatively small group of people, and fewer by far than 1 in a million individuals. The second group of souls are identified in these words. God told us that the record of one's beliefs and deeds will be exposed and denounced should a person be deemed to have worked against God and his chosen people. Such souls will be found guilty of misleading others through their cultural codes, societal edicts, political platitudes, and conspiratorial misconceptions and religious tomes. Their sentence will be to endure eternity with like-minded souls, incarcerated with demons, to be forever separated from Yahweh. The place is called Sheol. It's like a black hole. The Anan, Zana Shakir, and many of her associates are examples of this fate, and they will endure this penalty. The third category of souls is the most numerous. They will represent some 99.9% of humanity. These mortals will have died not knowing Yahweh, and therefore God will not know them. They will have lived their lives uninterested or perhaps deceived as to his nature. They are the victims of man's religious, political, and cultural schemes, not the advocates. These mortals without any spiritual affiliation will simply cease to exist. Be no punishment or reward. They will have lived out their lives as they saw fit. They will be nothing more for them other than the memory of some who go on. Their souls will cease to exist, just as their bodies succumb and ultimately decompose. So now returning to the text of Yahweh's prophetic witness pursuant to the harvest of Shabuwah. I separated the first two sentences from the third and the 13th statement of this chapter because Yahweh is no longer addressing the malcontents. There is a better option that comes highly recommended for those who want to be part of the Shabuwah harvest. And so this statement belongs with those which follow. However, God says, the one who takes refuge in me, the one who seeks my protection by trusting and relying on me, he will be allotted and will inherit the material realm, the land, and indeed the earth. And he will become an heir to my set-apart mountain. Yashayah, Yahweh delivers, 57:13. This isn't the case of bygones being bygones because this man represents Yahweh rather than Satan. He is Sadak, right? He is afforded Yahweh's protection because he, as the Adam of Parah on Teruah, will resolve the remnant of Yisrael's religious guilt and restore that remnant so they can attend the homecoming on Kippurim. They will not only have been brought back to Jerusalem and gathered around the Temple Mount on Moriah, they will be allowed into God's protective garden on Sukkah. They will live thereafter as a result of what Yahweh accomplishes in concert with his chosen implement. So I'm inspired to conclude Yahweh's assessment of the conflict he foresaw 2,700 years ago. One between his tzedakah, correct nakar, observant foreigner, and the adversary Zanan, demonic woman. This betrayer, concurrent with the Shabuwah katsir. Well, I've shared my thoughts along the way quietly, and from the beginning, I have been struggling to determine why such an insignificant coterie of imbecilic contrarians would garner the most comprehensive and condemning rebuke found anywhere in the prophets. Why was it so specific and so antagonistic? What had the mother goddess, D.P., done? Or what would she do that would deserve a confirmed ticket to Sheol? There are a number of potential answers, but one stands out above the others. Previously, I shared that the Anan picked Yahweh's chosen implement as time was running out and aggravating his plans to restore his relationship with his people in advance of his return, and that was the wrong person to pick on at the absolute wrong time. God is extremely protective of, even proud of, his children. And in fact, Yahweh and Yada are so inseparable, God not only affirmed this in Yeshaya 56, he revealed that he has given this man his seven ruach through his testimony as it was recorded in Isaiah 11. Previously, I surmised that the seductive whore earned this rebuke because she misrepresented Yahweh's nature and name, not only creating a mother god, but then presenting them as a hermaphrodite, equally condemning. She and her ilk have denied Dod's fulfillment of Chag Matzah, which is grounds in and of itself for eternal banishment. Also, after disparaging my wife, DP, and the Shaker betrayer, claimed to speak for God, as was the deploy tried by Miriam, something that drew a vicious and graphic response from Yahweh. She would even follow in Chawa's footsteps, replicating her selfish and misappropriated view of God's instructions, all to present herself as a goddess. The Zana tried to steal the next ingathering for herself while claiming that Yahweh Zeroah, the one cultivating the harvest, was killing those, is what they said, he was actually saving, thereby potentially precluding thousands from capitalizing on God's generosity through her confabulations. On another occasion, I revealed that God is particularly irritated when those who have been given access to the truth return the favor by rebelling against him and his testimony, becoming naysayers. There is also the issue of fracturing the family and breaking the covenant, something that Yahweh will not tolerate, not at this time. But in the end, I think it comes down to this. Yahweh didn't want the lot of them in his covenant family. He didn't trust them. And turns out, for good reason. So since I had shown them the way, God resolved this problem by letting them remove themselves from heaven. Then, to be certain that they would never return, and so that there would be no confusion, God inspired this prophecy pursuant to the Shabuwah harvest, knowing that we'd find it and convey it at precisely the right moment, that we'd come to understand it and that we would share it at this time. So let it be known, because God has stated it as such. The reprehensible Anan Zana Shakur is Sheol bound, and DP will be taking her malignant malcontents with her. They will not be included in the Shabuwah Katsir, and they will not be counted among those allowed to enter Eden during Sukkah either. Fair is fair. Even with the Aman, the truth, Tzedakah, correctly presented by Ha-Nakar, the observant foreigner, who is the Etz Dayath, the council of the tree of knowledge, standing before them, they chose to be Zana, seduced, and Shakir, betrayed by an Anan, demon, and her Naaf, unreliable enabler. And they became Anag, effeminate and overly sensitive, whiny bitches, self-entitled crybabies, delighting in ridiculing and mocking because they have been so easily swayed to incitement. With so much at stake, and with this being the pivotal point in history, where those seeking a relationship with Yahweh are forever separated from those who have chosen to be conspiratorial and religious. Yahweh is sending his people a herald, someone to blow his shofar, someone to serve as a restoring witness. God said. Then he will say, as the one making the announcement, you should choose to value and to highly regard your decision to pay attention and to turn around, preparing to make ready the elevated path to be raised up and lifted on high, choosing to be empowered and enriched by removing the obstacles and the stumbling blocks from my people's way. Yashaya, Isaiah 57:14. Yahweh is disclosing this about his Nakar, who will be making this announcement, whose responsibility it is to remove the obstacles of conspiracy and anti-Semitism and religion and in politics and all of the lies of man at this time from the raised pathway to God, so that the truth can be seen and known again. He is the man that God has said is known for being tzedakah, right, about the events that are now unfolding before our eyes and that will be unveiled over these next 7 years. So this is reminiscent of Yashaya, Isaiah 43, revealing that the voice representing God at this time will call out to those who are gathered in the last days, encouraging them to help him, to work with him, to build a raised highway to heaven from which all of the obstacles are removed. And that highway progresses through the remaining Mikre. But there may be something slightly different this time. If so, it could be important. If Yahweh is addressing the Nakar and saying this about him, then it is this same. But should God be declaring that the Nakar will be the one encouraging others to act in preparing this raised highway to heaven, then, of course, he is addressing the covenant family, the covenant members, and is advising them to participate in the process, which is how I read it. He is saying that should they choose to value making God more accessible and ridding the path to God of its religious corruptions, their decision to pay attention at this time, to look at life from God's perspective rather than from man's viewpoint, and then to contribute in a meaningful way to preparing the way, well, that this will serve them as well, providing an enriching and empowering result. Collectively, we can and should remove the obstacles and the impediments that have cluttered the path that has been concealed to God, exposing and extolling the values of the Moedim. God wants his people to have unfettered access to him. And he would like to see as many participating in the process as are equipped and prepared to do so. Yahweh is returning with his Son, our Savior, such that our work on Teruah, and now even in advance of Shabuwah, makes it possible for God's people to come back home. So you can mark it on your calendar. The date for Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations in year 6000 Yah, as the sun sets, it will occur on the 2nd of October in 2033. Therefore, the time remaining to capitalize on this announcement, to choose of your own volition to cherish and honor God's way, and to do an about-face and prepare yourself for his appearance, and to make a contribution to it, is short. This is among the final notices to Yahweh's people, and that they will be given. so they can approach and celebrate their Messiah when he returns, Dode, and enter the garden during Sukkah. This is heralding the last blast of the shofar. So please join me in being part of the solution of removing the impediments that have blocked the way, clear the path home of every religious and political obstacle. If you contribute, you will live alongside the one who made this pronouncement on behalf of the one who inspired it. We have Yahweh's word on it. So now that Yahweh has buried the naysayers and has moved on to his solution, we find that God's next prophetic declaration is challenging. Well, work to translate and to process. It is filled with descriptive titles presented in the participle and then infinitive forms, making them verbal nouns, working titles. As such, the issue initially is that since there are no quotation marks in Hebrew, and since a citation normally begins following Amar said, this would either have Yahweh addressing the one he has been referring to in the preceding statements, or the speaker is the Nakar, who is extolling God's intent at this time. Therefore, the one who raises, and Nasa, who carries away, Shakan, abiding and remaining as an ad, restoring witness, is either describing Yahweh if the speaker is the Nakar, or God is lauding the contributions of his Nakar if he is the speaker. Therefore, while Yahweh is all of these things, it's not only out of character for him to present himself as such, preferring to share credit and praise with his co-workers. There is no textual justification for initiating his quote after telling us that his name is set apart and special. Moreover, God has been addressing his Nakar, not himself. And the last one to speak in the previous statement was the observant foreigner. So if this assessment of the Hebrew text is accurate up to this point, based upon the many previous statements that I've translated, there is still an additional challenge here. We wouldn't normally think of any aspect of Yahweh's Ruach spirit being shafal, lowly or demeaned. And yet, it is used twice in this circumstance. In both the occurrences, the phrase is deployed in association with somebody who is daka, slandered, and then brutally assassinated. But even that is unusual, because the one who is crushed and killed is not only Chaya, restored to life, but he renews life. Therefore, my initial conclusion in this context, especially in conjunction with the Nakar, the observant foreigner who is Sadaka, right, pursuing the harvest, is that he is acknowledging that Yahweh will raise and support his people through his efforts. And even though he will be maligned and murdered in spite of his character being besmirched and his body being bruised and killed, yet he will live. And through him, so will others. Next, as for the proper treatment of Shafal, Ruach, a deeply embedded spirit who is lowered to be spiritually abused and abased, demeaned, and belittled, we find that this Shafal Ruach is then Chaya, received and restored. So I see this as one of the 7 Ruach of Yahweh who has given to the who has been given to the Choder, who will not depart him, just as the Spirit never departed from Dode. And even as his body is broken and bruised, crushed and slaughtered, Yahweh's Ruach will remain, just as she did to protect Dod's Nephesh. The Spirit of Yahweh is going to protect Yada's soul. This is similar to how the Ruach never left Dod, protecting his Nephesh soul so that he could endure the anguishing torture of crucifixion in addition to the crushing abuse of Sheol. In this way, the two men who offered to deliver the promised benefits of Pesach, Matzah, and Teruah, in collaboration with God, they are protected by Yahweh through his Ruach, through his Spirit. Just, of course, as we would expect of a loving Father. For the world watching these fulfillments of Passover and the Day of the Herald, well, they're sufficiently brutal to grab everyone's attention, while God quietly but surely comforts and protects his chosen. As such, it answers the question of why Yahweh would allow his son to endure crucifixion followed by an excursion into hell. But it's the Ruach who bears the blows, shielding the Nephesh souls who continue to live. With this very lengthy introduction, which I think was necessary in this case, and I hope that you benefit from it. I know it's a salve for my soul. Here is God's declaration. For indeed, this is what he says. Room, the one who raises and elevates. Nasha, the one who uplifts, supports, and carries away. Shekan, the one who abides and remains. Ad, forever, as a restoring witness to the eternal testimony. His name is set apart and special. He dwells in the highest heights of heaven, and he is set apart. In conjunction with the Daka, the one who is slaughtered and slandered, crushed, and killed, but remains. In conjunction with Daka, the one who is slandered and crushed, killed, but remains alive. The one who is pressured and harmed, bruised and wounded, broken and turned into ash. The deeply embedded spirit who is Lord to be spiritually abused and abased, demeaned and belittled. The Ruach who experiences the very depths that is being sent down to abuse and to humiliate. Will Chaya will revive and restore to life. The deeply embedded spirit who is Lord to be spiritually abused and abased, demeaned and belittled, will Chaya revive and restore life on behalf of the inclinations, motivations, indeed the judgment, the thinking and reasoning, that very disposition, the heart and confidence and character of the Daka, the one who is to be slandered and crushed, killed, but remain alive. Yashaya 57:15. Everyone, of course, is free to interpret these words differently. But be aware at this time, in this context, regarding this man who is working with Yahweh to restore his people, this rendering is accurate, and it's inspiring, and it is reassuring. It depicts what will transpire on Yom Teruah, the day of the herald, the Shabbat observance of September 23rd and 24th of 2033 in year 6000 Yah. To the backdrop of a solar eclipse, this is descriptive of the sacrifice of the man from Edom as the Adam of Parah, bloody red man of the earth who is a productive bull, purging the mortal remnant of Yisrael of their guilt prior to Dod's return with Yahweh. This is the final solution to Yahweh's Jewish problem. As his people return and come clean, becoming Yehudim again. The quarrel that has lasted 34 centuries and the time of contentiousness, it must end for happily ever after to begin. Whether it is the accusatory goddess cult of the demonic woman, cantankerous rabbis, or argumentative Christians, Yahweh has reached his limit. He will no longer entertain man's proposed changes and critiques. God is putting the world on notice that those who provoke him religiously or politically will not be rewarded with eternal life. Yahweh is furious, and for those enraging him, there will be no reward. This known, the follow-on statement was a head-scratcher initially. This is because Ruach, spirit, is a feminine noun, and the verb ataf was spoken such that the subject in the third person masculine singular is a man. Moreover, there are two entirely different ways to render the verb, either as to cover, to immerse, to clothe, and to shroud, or to become faint, feeble, and fade away. I chose the former because it is consistent with the profoundly important message of the foregoing prophecy regarding the Ruach being lowered and deeply embedded such that the spirit is abused and abased to protect the Nakar soul. And while his body will falter, the Ruach of Yahweh will absorb the blows, all to minimize the suffering. It reads, "For surely it won't be much longer, and it certainly will not be for an unlimited duration, that I will quarrel and accept the complaints, engaging in contentious debate. Therefore, there will be no eternal life while I'm provoked and furious. As a result, he will be covered within, immersed, and clothed by, shrouded by the Spirit from before my appearance. I myself will act, and I will engage with this Nesama, with this conscience." Yeshaya, Yahweh liberates. Isaiah 57:16. Makes me want to cry. Time is running out. Well, God has never been tolerant of the religious or the overtly political. We're nearing the point when they will no longer be allowed to even exist on the planet. They have annoyed the Almighty for far too long. The exacerbating reigns of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, thankfully, will soon be over. If you are counted among them, save your complaints for hell's warden. Since nothing annoys God more than religion, and in particular those who either negate his son's contributions or slander the one who is bringing them to light, both Christians and the demonic woman's clan are in for a harsh awakening. there will be no salvation or any prospect of eternal life for those who provoked God. In all of human history, as troubling as mankind has been, the next 7 years following the upcoming celebration of Shabuwah on the 22nd of May this year, less than 30 days from now, well, this time is going to be more aggravating to God than herding malcontent Israelites through the Exodus. And sadly for Yahweh, since he won't be re-engaging at this time to garner the world's attention, he will not be able to look away at his creation systematically destroys itself and his people. And they are butchered by those who are in league with Satan. And so during the 7 years from the Shabuwah Katsir through the Teruah Lakat, no one will be saved. There will be some who turn to Yahweh before the arrival of the two witnesses based upon the library at yadayah.com, and many more as a result of their message. But God isn't going to officially deliver their souls prior to the fulfillment of the fifth Mikra on Teruah. Also, being among the mortal remnant purged by the Adamah Parah and allowed into the garden on Sukkah does not guarantee eternal life. Those souls will have to listen, learn, engage, and make a contribution, earning God's trust en route to becoming immortal. With death lurking around every corner and with his witness in the center of the action, Yahweh's promised to shield him. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to do his job. And even beyond this, Yahweh is affirming that even as his body is mauled, so shall he live. In the fall of one, many will rise. And then in the manner of the Nakar, the beneficiaries will be adorned in the spirit, and they will advance and be present for Yahweh's return with King Daud. Now, up to this point, Yahweh has referred to his co-worker as Tzedakah, Enosh ben Adam ha-Nakar, even as Sharis, and also called him an Etz tree. Before acknowledging that he is Yada, the most prominent of trees, the Ayel, veritable doorway to life, and Sherif, the branch, and Shalah, the rocky crag. And now just 5 statements from concluding this narrative at the point that I'm enveloped in his Ruach. God speaks of his estrangement as being over, and his engagement with me in the most enduring way that he possibly could. He references my neshama. I say this because our neshama conscience is the most appealing aspect of our nature to Yahweh. It is the part of us most like him. Capitalizing on our neshama, we prove our worth, that we can be trusted, and that we can engage and do marvelous things in collaboration with our Father. Our neshama represents our ability to think rationally and morally, to be intelligent and discerning. It opens the floodgates to understanding. Given the option, I'd prefer by an infinite degree for Yahweh to choose to engage with my neshama over my bashar, which is a body. It is here that we relate and that we have formed our relationship. So at this juncture, I think that this next statement should have been the beginning of a new chapter. And in this translation, we find that God has good reason to be disappointed with his people, as well as the world at large. It is to such an extent that he has actually precluded access to immortality during the time of Israel's troubles. He can't even bear to look. After all, the reason he will envelop the neshama, the conscience that he is engaging through at this time with his 7 ruach, is to protect him from what remains a largely antagonizing and embittering and a rebellious people. Therefore, with this statement, I think Yahweh is telescoping us back in time to explain how Israel found itself in this horrible predicament. He said, with the perversity and depravity associated with religious guilt, of this covetous deception and immorality, with violence, greed, and profiteering that severs everything, I'm going to be provoked to anger. And I will lash out at him concerning myself due to my displeasure. Nonetheless, he went from backsliding to backsliding all the more, walking in rebellious fashion, remaining untrustworthy by way of his own thinking, personal judgment, and inclinations. 57:17. Even all the way back to Abraham and Lot, Yishak and Yaakov, particularly with his sons, and throughout the Exodus, the children of Israel have been slathered in their own rebellious guilt, wrong far more often than right. Then once in the land, the most religious and political of them became covetous, and they became violent tyrants, with rabbis profiteering to this very day. God is therefore angry. He's provoked 40 centuries of going in the wrong direction, of disavowing him, his name, his covenant, and his son, has left Yahweh to see Jews as rebellious and untrustworthy. They have favored their judgment over his, their Talmud over the Torah. So loving and supportive fathers tend to see their children as redeemable nonetheless. And since a remnant of Israelites and Yehudim will disavow religion and politics en route to celebrating Sukkah in Eden, there is hope. God says, I have seen and considered his ways, but nevertheless, I will heal him, restoring him forevermore. I will guide him. Therefore, I will completely fulfill the promise to reconcile, providing recompense to restore, providing comfort and compassion for him and to those who mourn with him. Isaiah 57:18. The restoration of Israel commences with the fulfillment of Teruah and year 6,000 Yah, all with the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah, the man from Edom. Then it progresses through Yom Kippurim when the restored remnant is reconciled upon Dod's return. These Moedim provide Yahweh's prescribed resolutions to cure the residual religious guilt of his people. This is when the promise is ultimately fulfilled and Yehudim find comfort in God's presence. As for the phrase, to those who mourn for him and with him, I suspect that this is best explained in Zechariah 12. There, Yahweh reveals that he will be returning with Dod, and that Yisrael will finally mourn for him, this one that they pierced, as God's beloved and begotten Son and their Savior. This will end 40 centuries of being bad. Yahweh's wayward children will finally come home. For those who are responsive, willing to go where his words lead, God will heal them. And his affirmation will restore his relationship with his people so that a remnant can return to Eden. Communicating through his witnesses, Yahweh will lead Yisro and Yehudim to reconciliation by walking them through his Torah, addressing the Bereth conditions and the Mikre attendants along the way back home. Then, upon their arrival, father and son will be escorting the covenant children through Pesach and Matzah to Bekurim. The Moedim, which enabled the Shabuwah and Teruah ingatherings, will attest to the significance of the sacrifice of Dod and then of the Adamah Parah, so that we can all celebrate Kippurim, prepared to enjoy Sukkah with our return to the garden. So today, on this side of the Shabuwah harvest and the Teruah gleaning, Jews are slowly awakening to Yahweh's best and final offer. They are doing what we have done, which is to accept Yahweh and what he is proposing, such that they become Torah observant and covenant responsive after a long, long separation. Yehudim are on the verge of being restored to the ranks of Yahweh's chosen people, again, the first family. And they will be back on duty after a prolonged recess. The firstborn of the lips is conceived and brought into existence for reconciliation from the one from a distant place and for one who is estranged. Therefore, from the one who is now near and closely related, and for the one whose approach is imminent, says Yahweh, then at that time I will heal him by promoting restoration. Yes, indeed. It is Dod who was the firstborn, the fruit born long ago, and he was conceived by the very lips of Yahweh, and he was brought into existence for our reconciliation and restoration, all from a very distant place on behalf of those who are estranged. And this brings us to, however, the wickedly wrong and contemptible, those who remain guilty and unjustified, who are akin to the sea, will be stirred up and driven out as he causes himself to be demonstrably tossed aside and banished, even removed, because being quiet and remaining silent is something they cannot comprehend. They're incapable of it. And so the foul muck and mire to be tread upon and swept away of these murky waters will be stirred up and tossed aside forever, expelled like the retreating tide. Therefore, my God says there is no reconciliation, restoration, or salvation for those who are wickedly wrong, who retain their guilt by being misleading. That's why Yahweh has a plan to purge us of our guilt. That's what occurs during the celebration of Chag Matzah, and again during the celebration of Chag Sukkah. It's a simple and direct statement that God has conveyed because he has a plan. And being right leads to vindication, but being wrong can take you back to a horrible position, eternally separated from God. So he says, choose to call out, issuing an invitation to read aloud and announce the summons to meet. Do not spare your throat. Lift up and raise your voice as if it were a shofar. Choose to boldly declare this report openly and conspicuously in proximity to my people, making them aware of their rebellion and defiance, and to the house of Jacob, telling them of their wayward nature and their misleading ways. God wants us to sing his message loud and proud, blowing that shofar to issue the warning that the religious are on the wrong path, and to blast the message of good news that there is hope, that the fulfillment of the final four Mikre will deliver it. I'll be there. Will you? And such is the conclusion of our basic but very thorough analysis of what Shabuwah has in store for the Covenant family. Thank you for listening.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.